Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Spunkify here on behalf of MMOBomb.com, and welcome back to the Free Play Podcast, episode 107. We took a little bit of a hiatus there for a couple weeks, but we're back. We're better than ever, refreshed, roaring, ready to go. Of course, I have my usual sidekick in crime, Jason Winter. How you doing, Jason?
I'm doing pretty well. I really needed that 3-week break to, get that thing looked at.
That thing looked at? That little growth on the side of that thing of your body? That part of your body?
We're not going to talk about where. Just,
Oh, it didn't actually improve anything, the growth, right? It didn't make anything seem larger. It just kind of, like, got in the way.
I developed mutant powers, actually.
Mutant powers. Oh, that sounds awesome. What are your powers? What are your powers?
I can sleep for 12 hours a day now.
What a mutant power. I think my old roommate had that power as well. You guys should form a school together. Excellent. You can be the Professor Xavier, and you're like, oh, and you just sit around instead of teaching people to sleep for 12 hours.
The League of Somnambulatory Gentlemen.
There we go. Sleep apnea. The League of Sleep Apneas. I don't know.
Okay.
There we go. Well, we have an extra special episode today, Jason. I don't know if you're privy to what goes on in this podcast, but for those of you who don't know, looking at the schedule here, we have some E3 news to talk about, of course. E3 just wrapped up last week. I was there. Jason, unfortunately, you weren't able to make it, mainly because I didn't invite you. I'm sorry.
Well, last time we tried to invite me to a convention, look what happened. So.
I know, right?
We don't talk about that.
We don't talk about what happens when we invite Jason. Jason just automatically gets denied from going to conventions, pretty much. He gets shut down, shot out of the air. You spawn in, and then you immediately get headshot. That's basically what happens.
I need to use my mutant powers more. Because when you're asleep, you go prone, so you can't get headshot.
You just sleep your way into the convention. You're like, what is it? What is that movie where the guy's like dead and he walks around, but he gets into everywhere? Like Bernie's.
Weekend at Bernie's?
Weekend at Bernie's. There you go. You're Bernie, and it's just the weekend is E3, I guess. I don't know. But we've got some E3 news, of course, to discuss. There was a huge showing of free-to-play at this year's E3, Jason. Huge, comparatively speaking, from previous years. And so we got to get a lot of good first looks at various titles coming out, some from very large AAA studios. I'm going to talk all about that and talk a little bit about Sony's committal to free-to-play, which is something that continues to grow. And, of course, we're going to just mention a little bit of what the community's been up to and get into that discussions as well. So, great episode for us. Glad to have everybody here that's listening, and why don't we dive right in. Okay, so E3 was 3 days long. It was packed full of gaming news across consoles, PC, whatever. It was everything. And free-to-play really had a good showing, I felt, at this year's E3. Last year's E3, of course, Jason, was pretty much focused on just the reveal of the PS4 and the Xbox One, of course. So this year's E3 was more about the titles that were going to be released, the AAA titles on those consoles. And we saw an interesting thing. Jason, you wrote about this a little bit. Sony kind of came out a little bit on their press conference specifically talking about free-to-play and talking about how they're committed to free-to-play. From your perspective, Jason, what all, because you reported on it, what all were some of like the highlights of that conference? What did they sort of touch on in terms of free-to-play?
Yeah, it was something that was kind of put into a longer presentation by the Sony president CEO Sean Layden. And he said, basically we're really committed to free-to-play. He said he has 25 free-to-play games coming to PS4 in the next 12 months. Of course, they have a lot of other stuff already. And he says, and on PlayStation, at point of entry, free-to-play means free-to-play, which you tend to believe means more than, that's something that like Xbox gets crap for. Like you have to pay the Xbox Gold, and then you have to also pay, well, sometimes you have to pay a subscription fee for games that have that, but even for free-to-play games, you still have to pay to get into them. Mm-hmm. Whereas PlayStation, Sony seems to be wanting to take the completely free approach where you can, just play for free. And in theory, I imagine they get a little bit of a cut whenever someone makes a microtransaction or whatever. That's how they make their money off of it. But they're understanding that that's just how it goes. That's the way the market is trending, and that it's better to let it be fully free and then get your money as people play it, as opposed to trying to charge them up front, even for something that's supposed to be free right out of the box.
Yeah, and this is kind of like a stark contrast to what Xbox has sort of been doing, or Microsoft rather. When looking at, say, the Microsoft press conferences at E3, majority of them were focused, of course, on the consoles, not so much PC, but nothing really touching on free-to-play at all. I mean, we saw Wargaming at E3 this year, and of course they were showing off, they actually showed off some World of Warships gameplay, which was nice to see, although I still wasn't able to play it. But they touched on the Xbox 360 version of World of Tanks, and that's still old, old gen console,
yeah.
not next gen. It wasn't really much touted in the ways of next gen free to play, which is really stark contrast in what you said with how Sony kind of just came out during their actual mainstream press conference and said, yes, we have 25 games that are free to play in the works for this year. So that's a pretty huge disparity between the two. And I'm kind of curious, Jason, what do you think this spells for free to play in terms of console versus PC over the next 4 or 5 years?
I think it is going to grow quite a bit on consoles, at least on the PlayStation 4. Again, Xbox is going to be a little behind on that front, but I suppose what it comes down to is the games themselves. Once Xbox does get their act together, or Microsoft does, if they decide to really embrace it, once they see how it goes on PS4, what's going to matter really is what kind of games they have. And obviously, you take it something like World of Tanks, for instance, although that's on the 360 and not the Xbox One. But if they do get another game that's really huge, that's a big free-to-play game, that's going to help them a lot, even if they were a little slow to adapt in the first place. Overall, though, yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be a lot bigger overall on consoles once they realize, what this can mean for them, and once they can kind of get over that initial hump of figuring you don't need to necessarily charge someone right out of the box or something. Because obviously that's what console games have been for 30 years. Go back to the Atari 2600 or whatever. You pay your $50 to get the game and you install it, and that's how you play it. They're still behind PC games in that manner. Just a few years.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And that may really end up hurting Xbox in the long run, because from what we saw at E3, I mean, you had, of course, the staple games that have already been on PC for a while, like PlanetSide 2, War Thunder. You have, the games like that are already solidified on PC. They already have that fan base behind them. So making the switch over to a console, for those who may not have like the best PC, may actually be an upgrade for them, switching over to the PlayStation 4 from the PC. And so when you look at it, if free-to-play is always supposed to be like the lowest barrier of entry, right? The easiest way to get into a game and to play it. In reality, with Steam consoles, with the Steam box being still, I think Alienware's latest Steam box is like $550 or something like that. That's still more expensive than a PlayStation 4 for a PC experience. And so in reality, if you can get a PlayStation for around $400, that represents a huge difference in entry in terms of the graphical level, like the graphical fidelity that you can get out of a game, and then also just not having to pay for all the extra stuff like the graphics cards and all that stuff crammed into getting the same experience that you would on a actual PC. So with that in mind, I would definitely see how consoles, at least the PlayStation 4, like we talked about, Microsoft may need to really retool how they think about free-to-play over the next couple of years. But at least on PlayStation 4, I can't see how free-to-play on the PS4 isn't going to grow, in a more organic fashion. And now that digital downloads are becoming pretty much the norm, all the digital sort of interface and how we interact and download our games, on the PS4, it seems to be mirroring much more of a PC sort of style of interaction, if you will, with free-to-play games. And
even with what they've got already, and I read this last week, I saw an interview with John Smedley, said like that, and this is for the previous generation of console, but he said DC Universe Online on PS3 is like their top money maker. It's like it's already doing that well, so they already obviously have a good basis for free to play, and obviously can show the the numbers to show how good it is financially. Maybe that's what has to do with, maybe that has had something to do with how quick Sony has been to adopt free-to-play on PS4. You know, Smedley shows them those numbers, says, "Hey, this is what we can do, so let's do it." And obviously, he's not sharing those numbers with Microsoft. So
No, no, I kind of like Microsoft seems to be going more for the sort of, I guess you could say, non-hardcore group of individuals.
They're going for like what we call those, like, the bro audience.
The
bro
shooters, audience,
sports games and the racing games and so on. Which obviously, again, you know, there's lots of free to play in that category. So
yeah,
I don't know.
And even then, we do have like PlayStation 4. You know, it's not just PC games being ported over to PlayStation 4. We have PlayStation specific games as well. I mean, there was one called Guns Up, which is entirely free to play. And it comes, you know, in similarity to something like Fat Princess. It has a kind of like that kind of vibe to it, where it's an RTS with some base building, you know, elements to it, tower building elements, and you have two sides sort of fighting against each other. There are titles coming out for the PlayStation which are exclusive to it, which again, if you're a PlayStation fan or you own a PlayStation 4, that denotes a clear benefit in terms of free-to-play gaming over Microsoft and Xbox One or Xbox 360 and over PC. Because suddenly, not only can you play a lot of their really iconic free-to-play PC games, but you're also going to be playing some of the iconic PlayStation games as well that are free-to-play. So that's really sort of interesting to me, just to see how much Sony is really embracing it this year. We only saw like a handful of some of the PlayStation 4 games that were set to come out, like Kingdom Under Fire 2, which is an MMO. You're seeing a lot more MMOs, free-to-play ones especially, go to consoles. And we're just seeing overall that growth in really embracement, you know, and the embracing of the free-to-play from those AAA developers who not only can look at it now and say, okay, I can make a free-to-play AAA game for PC, but I also can have that game go over to, you know, PlayStation 4 as well and conquer or tap two markets, essentially, which is really nice. So yeah, really looking forward to that. And hopefully we'll see some more, you know, really awesome AAA free-to-play games come out for consoles like Unreal Tournament maybe, and you know, a couple other ones coming as well. As far as what we saw at E3, there was quite a number of AAA, like through and through AAA free-to-play games on the horizon. We had the BattleCry, which we took a look at. We had the Armored Warfare from Obsidian Entertainment, Skyforge, the MMO that Obsidian's working on with Alod's team. We also had the upcoming Dreadnought, sort of spaceship battle game, which I took a look at here. It was developed by Jaeger, and I kind of wanted to talk about it a little bit because it was sort of the breakout AAA free-to-play title that no one really had heard about previous to E3. It was developed by Jaeger, not Jaeger Studios, just Jaeger. Jaeger Studios, I thought it was Jaeger Studios at first. Looking that up, that is apparently a photography studio.
I actually think I think I copied the info here straight from the press release. I think it is like Studio Jaeger.
Studio Jaeger. That
might be what it's called. That's how they do it in Germany. They put that stuff in front, so you know.
I see. Well, for all I knew, they were just, you know, really into photography.
We'll just call him Jaeger. We'll just
Jaeger. So Jaeger, they actually made Spec Ops: The Line before they went over to Dreadnought, and it's set 500 years in the future after a war between two big factions for resources of the solar system. You yourself are not part of that faction, but you represent sort of a lone wolf group who favor, you know, the lives of your crew over just whatever the current empire is looking for. And in our demo, we got to experience 5 of the different sort of class ship types that they had. These ships are huge, massive ships, Jason. We're talking Enterprise, you know, level of giganticism.
I was thinking more like Star Wars-ish, more like big Star Destroyers, because that's what
it
seems more like.
They do. There are actually more that. Sorry, that's a way better description in terms of size and massiveness. Yeah, Star Destroyers essentially. That's the Dreadnoughts, the largest ships. They have really huge firepower. They can fire a nuke as one of their special abilities. Each sort of class of ship has like 4 abilities that they can use.
That's a great firing those off in these like planetary orbits. Just
yeah,
shoot
right.
Shoot off nukes 100 feet above the surface. That
has no implications at all. You know, we're not really thinking about what happens on the surface here. We're just thinking about what happens in these giant, massive ships. Yeah, it's all relative in that respect. So if you got to take out a giant ship, you're gonna have to use a nuke, Jason. It's just what it's gonna take. You know. So there's dreadnoughts, there's corvettes, which are the smallest of the ships. They're kind of like skirmish ships, much more like X-wing or TIE fighter size, it seems. A little bit bigger than that. Tactical cruisers, which are the healer types. Artillery cruisers, which are essentially the long-range sniper ships. I played one of those in my demo of the game. And then the destroyer, which is the middle ground. You know, not too much firepower, but not too little. Not too much maneuverability, but not too little. And middle of the road armor and tankability. So you got a really sort of broad spectrum there of types of ship plays. And from the gameplay that I experienced, everything was very slow and methodical. You could die fast if everybody concentrated their fire on you. But one-on-one, you could take some hits, especially if you were a dreadnought or a destroyer. You were tanky, and it did sort of necessitate the need for concentrated fire and for team coordination. Because combined with a tactical cruisers could just, if you were attacking someone head on and they had a tactical cruiser backing them up and healing them, you weren't going to be able to like kill them essentially.
It's like medic heavy in Team Fortress 2.
Exactly. It was very much that sort of combo, and it looked beautiful. It was in pre-alpha, Jason, and it looked absolutely amazing.
Yeah, I'm watching the video right now just to refresh myself, and yeah, just all the lasers and explosions and stuff looks great.
Yeah, of course you can aim your, you have two different sets of weapons for each ship. So, for example, when I played the artillery cruiser, you had like this Gauss long-range rifle of sorts that shot a giant fire beam of laser goodness at enemies, and then your secondary was like a mortar as the artillery cruiser. Dreadnoughts had kind of like bombardments, as you would expect from a large ship, and then secondary was also some lasers as well. So you had a really good mix of different play styles from these different ships, and because they're so hulking and massive, the ships don't move very quickly either in that sense. The Corvette moves fairly quickly, and you can evade a lot of the fire of the larger ships if you're good at it. But the smaller ones, you're going to get hit. I mean, the bigger ones, you're going to get hit. It's just like a given. And so they have abilities sort of set up to negate that or buffer against that. And what it really just sort of showed me is that we're coming into an age now where free-to-play games, with the advent of Unreal Engine 4 and these next-generation consoles, we're really starting to see a plethora of games that really are representative of next-gen, or at least current-gen, gameplay mechanics and fidelity and quality in that way. We started to see that with games from Sony, like the PlanetSide 2 and H1Z1 coming out, and of course EverQuest Next and what have you. But now it's sort of spilling over into more of the mainstream developers too, those who have yet to really adopt free-to-play as much. We had, for example, BattleCry, which was made by none other than the studio that I can't remember the name right now. I want to say Obsidian, but it's not Obsidian.
Bethesda,
there we go.
Let's buy I forget what their studio in Austin is. It's BattleCry Studios.
It's BattleCry Studios is the name of the studio. But it's a subsidiary of Bethesda.
Yeah.
And again, I got a hands-on of that, and that's a game who the lead artist on that game, Jason, is the lead artist or the lead director and artist director for Dishonored. They have the exact same level of quality being put into these titles as their AAA titles that we saw go for $60.
Sure.
So with all that combined, we're really E3 just really spelled out, to me at least, it spelled out that free to play is getting just as much coverage now by certain developers as buy to play, just as much space on the floor as buy to play, and really is not looked at as just sort of this thing that can be tacked on. It is looked at as its own form of gaming and treated as by these developers as something that equates or necessitates the exact same level of budget, it almost seems, as some of these other buy-to-play titles, essentially.
Yeah, I think we're definitely past the point where we have realized, have come to have thought that free-to-play is nothing but just, I mean, for a while it was the crappy imported Asian games with bad translations and so on. And now, like I said, all these North American companies are definitely jumping on the train. They know well enough that they can make pretty good money off this sort of thing. I mean, you look at the big successes in free to play, stuff like World of Tanks, League of Legends, even like talk about Team Fortress 2, anything like that. They know that it's not just you can still make high quality games out of it. There's no reason not to. There's no reason not to put the same kind of care and dedication into making them that you do with a $60 PC title. Now, of course, the question is always, you can make it look good off the start, but how much is it going to stick around? How much are you going to continue updating it and keep developing it and so on with whatever kind of expensive game engine or pretty art direction or whatever you have past when it comes out? That's still the question we're going to have with a lot of these games. And just like pay to play MMOs or whatever, some of them are going to fail. That's just how it's going to go. Doesn't mean that free to play is a failure, that it just can't work. It's just how it is, and you just have to see how it's going to go down the line.
And you bring up a good point, because when you think about older console games, for example, where the community has died out, you can still load that game up and play that game and maybe find a lobby or two, because those servers are pretty much always present. They're on like the official servers. But how does that work in terms of free to play? We see free to play games shut down all the time when they lose their audience of sorts. So how will free to play games be handled by, say, PlayStation, if the game sort of tanks, or if it just loses that audience? How long is it going to get supported comparatively to how long free to play games get supported after they sort of die out?
Well, again, it depends on the kind of game. I know what you're talking about. Sure, there might be some games like that, but I think, again, in terms of like MMOs, when Star Wars Galaxies went away, you can't play it anymore. When I guess City of Heroes was free to play when it went away, but it still would. What was the other one? Warhammer Online wasn't free to play, and it went away, and you can't play it anymore. So I don't think that's necessarily something that has to do with whether it's free to play or buy to play or subscription based or whatever. It's just they're going to decide whether they think they can keep making money off it, and whether they should keep putting it out there, and whether they're going to keep it around. Can't you? You can still play Tribes of Sin, can't you? So that's a free to play.
Yeah, you can still
that's a free to play game. Yeah, that's still they still have the servers running for it. So it can be a different case depending on each game.
Yeah, and I guess I wasn't really thinking so much about about MMOs, as I was thinking about a majority of the free to play games touted at this E3 were session based in a sense. And I know that there's still progression, there's still unlocking and stuff like that. So there's still that MMO aspect, that progression aspect. But out of all the games that I could think of that were announced on the PlayStation 4 this year, I could only think of maybe one or two that could be defined as a through and through MMO, and that would be something like Kingdom Under Fire 2, for example. Obviously, Kingdom Under Fire 2, you log in and you have your character and that persists. But then there's other games. Skyforge. Yeah, Skyforge. I don't know if Skyforge was actually announced for console though. I don't remember.
Okay, I missed it.
Yeah, I don't remember if they actually announced that for consoles. But I do know Kingdom Under Fire was one that they announced for consoles itself. So yeah, session-based gaming is a little different, because with session-based gaming you have to have groups of people around to play. You can't just like jump into the world and be like, well, I see a person every once in a while, but overall I'm playing by myself. In session-based gaming, you got to have that player base to kind of maintain those groups going and not have to wait 10, 15 minutes for a match to pop up. Okay. So those are some of the things that I wonder about, just how dying populations in free-to-play games will work, if they'll still offer them, or if we'll see some of like the shutdowns that we see happen across some PC-based free-to-play games. It all depends on if, how much support does Sony actually require from the developers versus how much they provide themselves in terms of server support, etc. Them running the servers versus the developers running the servers, etc. So that's some of the ideas that run through my mind in that regards.
What a killjoy! We're just starting to talk about all these great games coming out. And we're talking about how they're going to die.
I know. Well, it's one of the things that is talked about in free-to-play gaming way more than in mainstream gaming is games shutting down, because it does seem like games shutting down is much more volatile when it comes to free-to-play. That happens much more often. But yes, it's a little cynical for me to start talking about them shutting down before they're even launching. But those are things that you just think about. You just think about how are those things handled? How are those things going to be handled? Because depending on how these games are accepted and they're sort of embraced by the community as a whole, by the PS4 community specifically, I'm thinking about, will sort of dictate how PlayStation goes about in the future, not just porting games over from PC, but developing PlayStation 4 exclusive titles just for the free-to-play market, essentially. That being said, I do like the prospect now of cross-platform play, with more and more people from PS4 playing with people from PC, especially things like War Thunder as an example of that. PlanetSide 2 isn't cross-play, unfortunately, but you do have some opportunities for that, so I always welcome combining those communities where possible. Other highlights from E3, Jason. Do you have any personal highlights that you can think of things that you observed from E3 that you were interested in or sort of perked your interest?
It's weird. Like I'll watch the presentations on the first day on like Monday for Sony and for Xbox, maybe Nintendo if I'm really in the mood for it. And then after that, I just kind of let it drift by me. I look at everything that kind of goes by, and I guess my thing is that I've become a little more of I'm not interested in seeing the hype for a game. I want to see it come out. Like, I mean, we'll take Watch Dogs as an example. That was a game that was hyped. We'll talk about that later, of course. But that was when that was supposed to be a launch title for PS4. They wound up delaying it. So it's like anytime I see something that's coming this fall or coming this winter, I'm like, okay, when's it really coming out? So it's like it's some of that. It's kind of neat to see the video and whatever, but it's so far off that I just have a hard time getting that pumped up for it. So I just kind of watch it. I watch the pretty stuff. I make rude comments on Twitter, and that's usually about it.
Yeah, it's kind of unfortunate that E3 has sort of turned into just a vertical slice across the board for a majority of it. And then you're like, okay, first of all, when is this actually going to come out? Second of all, what is it actually going to look like?
Yeah, exactly.
Those are two big questions that we see from E3. Not so much at PAX, it seems. PAX
and the thing is, too, is that E3 is cool, but it's not like 20 years ago where the only way you hear about new games, maybe you got Nintendo Power magazine or something like that, and then once a year there's a big show like E3 and there'd be all sorts of news about it. Now it's like we have this stuff year round. Like I see all the we got probably 20, 30 different press releases, and it's like, but we get those all the time. So I guess I tend not to notice as much when there's that many of them being shoved in my face.
E3 is just a press release put in a building.
There you go.
It's
a big press release.
It's just a giant press release in a building is what it is.
And even like, that is like I said, less necessary because these guys get our attention all the time. Now, obviously, You went there and you got to actually have hands-on with the game, but you're at least a half dozen times this year or a dozen times you're going to get hands-on with some new game, sitting in your apartment probably.
And to be honest, what we saw at E3, I would say only half of the games that I was shown I actually got to be hands-on with.
Sure.
So the other half were just video presentations.
You get to see it on a bigger screen. You can see it on like the giant jumbo 30-foot screen or something. But
yeah, right. Yeah, that's totally worth it.
Hey, I don't mean to sound all totally cynical or whatever, but it's definitely. I mean, this is something even the companies were realizing. I remember a few years ago, a lot of them were talking about just not going to E3 because they just figured it didn't serve their needs anymore, and it was so expensive to bring all the people and have all the booth space and whatever. And I think that might be a trend we see a little more of. Maybe we'll get more of a like online convention kind of thing.
Yeah, I do know that Nintendo kind of does a little bit of that sometimes with some of their conferences, and I think there's like Nintendo Treehouse and all their other types of like online sort of showcases.
And not just what I was watching on the various news sites, but also just seeing a few companies here like, hey, here's our stream from E3. It's like, well, why go to E3 if I can watch your stream?
I think the problem is also the idea of being drowned out. During E3, we get little next to no real press releases outside of E3 press. You don't really get news from companies who aren't attending E3 so much because they know that it's just going to be drowned out by E3 news. So it's almost like they feel forced to go to E3 to get coverage during that time period. Otherwise, they might as well just not say anything for a couple of weeks around that time. Because
that's what I would do if I was on a budget. I'd just have all sorts of press releases like 2 weeks before and 2 weeks after E3.
Yeah, There you go. If you're ever looking to do marketing for a game that you're making, don't do it around E3. It's bad timing.
Okay, that said, I will say there's one game that I did notice that was at E3 that I did watch a little stream of, The Crew. I don't know if you followed that at all. It's the driving
A
MMO.
little bit. Well, how was it for you?
I don't think it's free to play. But yeah, it looks really interesting. I'm definitely interested in checking it out. Very open world, like whole United States kind of thing.
Well, that's nice. We haven't really seen an open world racing game like
Yeah.
ever. I actually paid a lot of attention to the Oculus Rift and the lesser-known Morpheus project, which is for PS4. I got to play the Oculus again, using the Eve Valkyrie demo. Still just as cool, a little bit better looking. It moved from the Unity engine to Unreal 4, and very hard to navigate in terms of like getting actual kills, but it just used the whole technology to great effect. And interestingly enough, one of the games being shown with the Oculus was the new Alien Isolation game, which is the survival horror set in the Alien universe. And that used it to great effect because you could actually peer around corners with the Oculus Rift on. It added extra gameplay elements that wasn't just, oh, I can look around. It was like, oh, I can peek around corners now, where previously I wasn't able to peek around a corner and adjust my gameplay based on that. And that got me think. Go ahead.
No, go ahead and finish your thought first.
Oh, I was just saying it got me thinking about where this technology could take us, not just in general gaming, but in free-to-play or MMO gaming in the next 10 to 15 years. What that could actually bring about in terms of gameplay mechanics and additional changes to how we interact in an MMO space. Because essentially now we connect with this avatar that we see from like a third-person perspective. But with the advent of the Oculus Rift or Morpheus, we can start thinking in terms of not just seeing it from a third person, but actually feeling like you're that person in first person, because of the whole wearing it and looking around and interacting with the world from that perspective versus from this 3 feet away perspective from your monitor, plugged into a character who's 10 feet away from the camera that's looking at them.
I was about to say, you know me, I'm an Oculus skeptic. I've said that before.
Mm-hmm.
Now, to hear you talk about having it actually add a different kind of gameplay element, the peeking around corners thing, now that part sounds cool, and that sounds to me like the sort of thing that the Oculus is going to need in order to be successful. Because you look at it, something like Valkyrie, which is what spaceship flying shooting kind of game. All right, we have those. I can operate that just fine with a control pad or with a mouse and keyboard or whatever. And I just feel like having an Oculus and being able to like look and move your head or whatever to make stuff move left and right or whatever, just seems to me like it's a gimmick. It's the sort of thing that's going to sound really cool, and you're going to enjoy it for a while. But then, like you said, if control is not very good, you'd rather have a different kind of pad or something. And it's just going to come across as an expensive little toy that you're gonna think is neat for a while. But then you'll be like, well, why am I not just playing this with a control pad or something?
Yeah, the main gameplay. Go ahead.
I was going to say that's just the sort of thing it needs to. Really, I think, achieve a long-lasting popularity and being seen as more than a gimmick.
Yeah, you do make a point there about the gameplay mechanics added by the Rift have to feel weighty enough, essentially, to
have to be something you can't normally do with just regular controls.
Yeah, and to a degree, I would agree that Eve Valkyrie does that, in the sense that you can lock on to other players by looking at them and sort of getting the targeting reticule centered over them while your ship moves in one direction. And by doing that, you're able to then lock onto them and fire off the missiles at the target. Yeah, that is just one. It uses it, other than looking around your cabin, it uses it in just that one respect. You look at the target, it sort of adds a lock-on reticule, which allows you to then fire the rockets. But other than that, it's pretty much relegated to just a free-form camera that allows you to move around independently of where your control stick is headed.
What it reminds me just a little bit of? It reminds me of the various motion control things that came on consoles, the Kinect and the whatever the stuff was. And it's like, that was really cool and that was really huge for a little while. It just seems like it's kind of sort of not gone away, but just isn't as big as it once was. It's being seen as more of a kind of temporary thing, I
Sure.
guess.
What do you think about Oculus Rift or any other sort of VR in the terms of MMO space, for example? Because that's something that we have yet to actually see any, or at least I haven't seen any gameplay demos of any MMOs using the Rift, for example. I can imagine it's something in like, I don't know, not Daisy, but H1Z1 or PlanetSide 2. I can definitely see the Rift really being advantageous and sort of adding to that immersion. It may not necessarily be an extra gameplay mechanic, but when you're talking about MMO, you're talking about sort of receiving a lot of your immersion through your character and through the environment, and getting that done in an Oculus setting just seems like it would add a lot to an MMO. You would have almost like a dot hack scenario, essentially. What do you think about the Oculus used in that sort of respect?
I could see it, if the game was right for it. I think it would have to be a game that doesn't have much of a like hotbar, with 30 skills like WoW or something like that. There's no way you could really control that with, vision and a little bit of movement or whatever. It'd have to, like I said, something more like action combat, like we actually swing a sword and it does something kind of like an H1Z1 kind of game. I think that's where it could be pretty good. I don't know about, again, you talk about something like, if you talk about a traditional MMO, like having a big raid with 20 people or whatever, all of them using Oculus Rifts and probably bumping into each other all the time. I don't know if it would work for that. I think it would work better for something a little smaller, something not geared around having 30 or 40 or 50 people around. I think you could work it out okay.
Yeah, and we got to remember that this is just sort of like the initial versions
Sure.
of the Oculus and the Morpheus. I definitely think over time, more and more genres will be sort of more easily adaptable to using technology like this as the technology improves, and the purpose of the technology and the ability and the capability of the technology improves. Facebook does own Oculus now, and they did say that they wanted to make an MMO where millions of players could jump in. I don't want to play a Facebook MMO.
Farmville on Oculus.
Yeah, I would rather not, run around on a farm and do what I do on a phone, but in just like a 3D environment where I'm wearing an Oculus. I would rather not have a $300 extension just for something like that.
Yeah.
But I definitely could see it being used in MMO space to add a layer of immersion not seen by MMOs. Yeah, we can zoom in on some MMOs and see everything from first person, but you're still looking at a screen in first person. That still kind of disjoints it. But when suddenly that screen becomes your vision and only your vision, then you start to open up possibilities of really sort of adding some interesting gameplay mechanics based on the fact that they know that you only see everything from a, human tunnel vision sort of view, essentially. So yeah, it was good E3. Definitely a good E3 for free to play. Really happy to see a lot of the games that were mentioned out there. And I kind of excited to see what's for free to play next year. Already ready for next year's E3. If this is what we get at this year's, it's really going to sort of spell out. It'll kind of like, depending on how free to play goes this year, we'll kind of see how the console generations take free to play over the next year or two, depending on how in this initial year or two of next gen console free to play goes, and how that sort of spills over not only to console free to play but to PC free to play as well. Side note, I really wanted to mention the fact that Age of Wushu is heading to the CryEngine 3. That was something that was only announced to us at E3, which I felt was pretty cool. So
that is weird to take an existing MMO and just completely change the engine that it's built on.
Yeah, I know, right? That
sounds like it would be like a monumental task. But...
It does, and they kind of just said it nonchalantly, like, yeah, we're moving it over to CryEngine 3, and no, we don't have anything to show you. But we will, kinda, in the future. So they didn't really talk about when it would happen. They just said that it would improve the combat as well as the aesthetics, honestly. But it all depends on how well they can actually implement CryEngine 3, because it's not just the fact that they, I can move it over to CryEngine 3, immediately looks better. They have to have the skill to actually execute and use the engine to the utmost quality and style to get what they want out of it. Plus, the CryEngine 3 isn't innately built for MMOs, it seems.
Sure.
So it'll be interesting to see how they do that. And I kind of feel like they feel like they're getting squeezed by some of the other martial arts MMOs on the horizons. And so we'll see exactly how that pans out. So that's another little interesting highlight from E3 there. Overall, good show. If you guys watched the E3 show, let us know some of the things that you found most interesting, whether they be free to play or otherwise. I'm always curious to see what players enjoyed and did not enjoy from these large conferences, and feel free to hear voice your feedback rather. Talking a little bit about Dabombs and Abombs, Jason. I wanted to give an A-bomb to Watch Dogs specifically for hindering the PC version of Watch Dogs. For those that don't know, Watch Dogs, of course, it's kind of like Grand Theft Auto, but in this little bit of future with hacking. And the PC version, it was touted as being this whiz-bang of a game, having all these crazy graphical settings. They showed off at E3 2012. Came out on Xbox One, as well as PlayStation 4, and, of course, PC. And it looked like crap. Or at least it looked a lot worse than it did in the demos. Well, come to find out, Modder on, I think, NeoGAF has figured out a way to hack into the files of Watch Dogs and has found the original files presented in 2012 on a really awesome version of Watch Dogs, the graphical settings. And he has re-implemented those, Jason. Mm-hmm. So you're able to, on PC now, play with the majority of features found on that vertical slice in 2012. The rest of the features are said to be coming soon as he can figure out how to unlock them. And it kind of just makes me think, like, why? If you had them already on the disc, why not use them for the PC version? And the only thing I can really think of, Jason, is they did not want it to look like it completely blew next-gen console versions out of the water.
Yeah.
But that's exactly what it's doing.
That's all it is. And they just were hoping it wouldn't get caught.
Yeah, right? Which is surprising since they know that people love to mod things on PC.
And they left all the files and settings or whatever on there. You delete that crap.
I don't understand. Yeah, I don't understand why they even left it on there, Jason. It's like it's as if they did all the work for it, and then they realized when they were optimizing everything that they couldn't do the same level of graphical settings for the Xbox One and the PS4 version. And so instead of just saying, well, the PC version is superior, they kind of took this approach where, well, we can't have one version just obviously be much better than the other, so let's just make them all mediocre in that respect.
Yeah.
You know what's even more surprising, Jason, is the fact that, well, it was surprising until I forgot it.
Completely forgot it.
Yeah. Oh, the surprising is the fact that the newly sort of revamped version, if you unlock those files, for those of you who own Watch Dogs for PC, this may be a good tip for you guys. If you guys use those files found through the mod, your performance actually increases. So not only can you get a graphical increase in fidelity, your performance will increase as well, which makes no sense. It's like they did all the optimization for the PC version on that graphical setting, and then Ubisoft was like, no. Scrap that, do this lesser version, and then all the optimization went out the window. I don't even know how that can happen.
It's been an interesting week for E3, or for Ubisoft.
Yeah, Ubisoft and E3. Just overall, there's a lot of weird stuff going on there with Watch Dogs. So A-bomb to Watch Dogs, more specifically A-bomb to Ubisoft for choosing to do that to the Watch Dogs version. That being said, even despite Watch Dogs looking a lot better graphically, it still has mediocre gameplay in my opinion. So I guess graphics can only spruce up a game's sort of generic gameplay to a degree before you still like, it's just graphics. Jason, what do you have a Dabomb or A-bomb for?
I'm going to give a Dabomb to Defiance, which a lot of you probably know I've been playing a fair amount of. I wrote about it for the site a little while ago, streamed it a while back. Really having a good time in it. I was not expecting that, especially after thinking about how, and when it came out last year, we all knew it was kind of rushed, and it was kind of unpolished when it first came out because they had to get it to match the timing of the show. And then, of course, I watched the show and was like, This is sort of okay at times, so I just kind of forgot about the game. But I remembered playing it a bit in beta. I think it was all right. Nice to just run around and shoot stuff. And now having gotten back in a year later after it's gone free to play, I think they really have done a pretty good job to spruce it up, to give you lots to do. There's just so much to do on the map that I keep running into stuff when I'm on the way to do other stuff. Really enjoying the gunplay and the grouping stuff. I actually ran a little. This wasn't in the review, but I ran a little. I don't know what they call the dungeon. Whatever that is.
Co-op missions.
Co-op mission, yeah, whatever. Did that. A lot of fun playing with my sniper, hanging out in the back and shooting stuff while it was trying to kill my friendlies. But yeah, I mean, it's a pretty solid game. And I don't know how good the free-to-play model is on it in terms of, when am I going to find that motion where it's like, oh crap, I really need to pay to get a good gun or to advance quickly. But after about a dozen hours in, I'm still enjoying it pretty well. And if I don't like it after another 10 hours, big deal. I spent 20 hours, I didn't pay for it, but it's definitely something to look at if you hadn't tried it out already.
Yeah, I think that was one of the things about Defiance when it initially came out. It's not a bad game. It just definitely didn't necessitate for one, a subscription, which it didn't have.
It didn't have one, yeah, but it was I think it was only like $30 or $40 too for the base game when it first came out. So
yeah,
that.
It being free to play now, there's not really anything out there left for free to play that's like that, other than say PlanetSide 2, which is more PvP focused, obviously. So definitely, if you're looking for a Borderlands-like experience, I would say Defiance is a great option for that. What Eagle rating are you, Jason?
I'm around 250 now.
Wow. I'm only like 160 or so
right.
I'm moving right up there. I'll have to group up sometime and do something. That's one thing I really like, Jason, the fact that you said that you encounter things in the world, is that for the majority of the game, most of the group content around the maps you can do at whatever Eagle rating, because it just boosts you to whatever Eagle rating the group is, essentially. So in that regards, I think that's pretty nice, and it makes the game feel a lot more open and less linear, I found when I was playing. Did you have the same sort of experience?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, nice. All right, so why don't we go ahead and move on to the member highlights here. We had quite a few people talking about ArcheBlade and why they felt it failed. But first of all, we had a Dabomb from Nintendo who said, "Dabomb goes to minimum, not being dead. I look forward to the game and already took it off my list, and now it is back, and the gameplay from Spunkify really looks good and all." Well, thank you so much. I'm glad I can make the game look fun and enjoyable. He also went on to say, "An Abomb is properly going to League of Legends for being the pros in nerfing a champion out of everybody's champion pool by messing up the mechanics, which made him so valuable." I guess it was a certain male champion, because he said him so valuable. So there's a favorite champion of his, I guess, that Riot took the nerfing that he didn't really like. Nintendo,
apparently a favorite champion of a lot of people, he says, was in everyone's champion pool.
I know, right? I wonder which one that was. Nintendo, if you have an example, let us know, man. I'm curious to know.
Be specific.
Be specific, man. It's all right. You can call it out. It's all right. No problems. But yeah, member comments specifically dealing with ArcheBlade, because of course, if you remember from the last episode, if you watched it a few weeks back, we talked about how ArcheBlade closed, and it was the action fighter game. It was the developers, CodeBrush, were trying to make something kind of like Street Fighter, but in a team-based scenario, in 3D, of course. And I asked why you guys felt it closed, why you felt the game didn't succeed, and there was a ton of comments about it, Jason. I was surprised by how many people actually played ArcheBlade and had something to say about it. Some of the key points that they mentioned were a lack of focus, bugs, some pay-to-win aspects before a final pre-patch, and then there was a couple of member highlighted comments that I wanted to touch on. One of which was Pretzel Bear.
It's my turn, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it is your turn. Sorry. There you go.
All right, Pretzel Bear. Pretzel Bear said, "ArcheBlade failed because CodeBrush listened to the stupid part of the community." Doesn't ever make a game manufacturer do that. Lack of actual updates and tons of bugs that actually stop people from trying the game. I know a beta game is going to have bugs, but when people can't even start the game, you need to get on it and fix that. Then it was going pay to win. CodeBrush didn't have any roadmap and so much more. It was a good game, a game that definitely was missing, but it doesn't matter how starved people are. If your game isn't working and you're making bad decisions, your game won't grow. So basically, he liked the game, but pretty much everything. He liked playing the game, but hated everything else about it.
Yeah, and that's sort of the interesting thing is the premise was really good. You know, a true fighter game with combos and counters and blocking. But he touched on the fact that the game sort of had this pay-to-win aspect, and there was a lot of bugs, and the developers just kind of seemed like they didn't know where to take the game next after a point. You know, and when the developers sort of mentioned that they were running out of funds, you could probably equate that to being one of the reasons why they didn't know where to take the game, because they didn't know financially where they could take the game, or maybe they couldn't take it any further. But it definitely seems like we mentioned before, it was an experience that was sort of like they fumbled the ball. And Sniper Walrus, which, by the way, love your name. Pretzel Bear and Sniper Walrus, both of you guys have awesome names.
They're in the zoo.
Exactly, right? I don't know if I want to see a pretzel. Oh, no, I would definitely want to see a Pretzel Bear.
Pretzel Bear sounds tasty.
Yeah. A Sniper Walrus sounds dangerous.
Yeah.
You seen those tusks? Imagine a Sniper Walrus will do after he snipes you and then uses those tusks. Man. Sniper Walrus, though, he says that the game was clunky, bad balance, bad graphics, bad cow shop, bad developers. Everything about that game sucked. No other reason. But then he goes on specifically says it would have succeeded if it was good. Well, obviously, if things are
Sure.
good, it tends to do better. But he says people wanted it to be good. It had a massive amount of players for a few days on its open beta. But when they saw it was a piece of shit, they left. And then he's like, I feel like I should be on the show. Sniper Walrus, I would love to have you on the show, man. I would love to have you on here and talk about games. As always, we'd love to have any of the community members on here. So feel free to send us an email or just contact us here on YouTube, and we can get that happening. But yes, I do agree with you in the sense that it would have been good. People wanted it to be good. I do think people wanted it to be good. We saw in the comments how many people were commenting about it and commenting about what they felt was good about the game, but then where they felt the game failed. And predominantly, it was in the cash shop area, you know, having stats on items that you could pay real money for in the cash shop. That was a thing at one point, Jason.
Yeah.
In ArcheBlade. And of course they removed it pre-launch, like the patch right before launch, but it had already been in the game long enough to where it had pushed away some of the more hardcore players, I feel, like some of the players who actually wanted the game to succeed. And then, of course, you had the bugs, which no one wants to have bugs, especially bugs that are that persistent for that long. We take the last.
Once you see pay to win, you're just gonna leave.
Yeah, and that's the thing I think nowadays is that it doesn't matter how good the premise of a game is. People are just so fed up with pay to win, they're not going to tolerate it. You know. What does Blue Death have to say, Jason?
Blue Death 267 says, ArcheBlade. It's not the gameplay. It's not the graphics. It's not the area baseness.
I don't know what that means.
It's because it was not made or published by a well-known company like Nexon. Well, okay, or any other well-known company, but I guess he likes Nexon a lot. But yeah, I mean, again, he's just saying it wasn't. The game was fine. He liked playing it. He liked the graphics. Just really bad decisions made for the development.
So this is another sort of viewpoint. Some people didn't mind the gameplay or the graphics. They used the Unreal Engine 3. You know, I think graphics is some sort of like subjective. You know, whether or not you feel like that makes up a large portion of whether the game was playable. But he mentions that the game just didn't have really enough, you know, focus on it. You know, enough hype, enough vision. And as a Korean developer, as an indie Korean developer, I can definitely agree that Codebrush didn't have the sort of foothold or marketing, you know, plan, if you will, or budget to really make a dent in terms of like garnering interest in people looking for it. Especially, I think that it's easier for games that are indie that aren't free to play to maybe get some of that interest, because they can grab that interest from outside, you know, websites that aren't necessarily just focused on free to play. But definitely when it comes to free to play, I think a lot of developers, especially when a game is foreign, if it isn't already an MMO or some other big game that's going to get caught by a lot of big networks, it's just not going to have the same presence if it's not tied to a larger publisher. Would you have to agree with that?
Yeah, excuse me, pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, can you think of any games that were foreign based or free to play that had like less publishing or less, marketing to them that have still done well and succeeded? I'm trying to think off the top of my head. I don't really think of
I was like, I keep wondering about War Thunder. It's like I keep wondering if they're going to ever get some decent marketing on, so they can actually be on par with World of Tanks or with Wargaming.
Wargaming told me at E3 they had 3,500 employees now.
I know, and I remember that article I read a while back that said when War Thunder went into beta, it had like 120 people at Gaijin.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, Wargaming is huge.
That being said, I did see a War Thunder booth at E3. Nowhere near as big or as loud as Wargaming.
Oh, Wargaming has huge booths.
Yeah.
And when you met with them, did they have a good food spread? Because they did last time when I was there.
Wargaming did not actually. I ate a Three Musketeers bar in their office. That's what they had. No food spread.
They had a cookie. I just remember the cookie from the last time I saw them at a convention.
Well, it's not really a food spread.
Well, but that's what I remember about it. There were a lot of cookies. They had a lot.
You're like, all I remember is the cookies. I don't remember anything about what I saw. Just the cookies.
Yeah.
That's all I remember. That's awesome. All right. Well,
guys have great cookies.
They have great cookies, and they have Snickers bars and Three Musketeers. Sometimes they also have energy drinks, depending on who's there. Well, the question of the week, it wasn't actually last week, but it was, do you think it will become common for free-to-play games in the future to receive a majority of their content from players? So just for a refresher, we had been talking about Unreal Tournament, the new one, and how that the developers Epic Games was planning on having the community contribute a lot of the content, a lot of maps, skins, maybe modes, and they can choose whether or not they would have players pay for it or if they would give it up for free. So the question is, can that be something that doesn't just sort of fall under Unreal Tournament, but can fall under a lot of different games and a lot of different styles of games? So we had a comment here from TM Crazarts, who said, I honestly do believe that players or community developers will provide the content in the near future. There have been very good examples of community-made maps, guns, weapons, and so forth. Call of Duty World at War is a great example of community maps done right, mostly. Tribes Ascend is another good example for community-made weapons, modes, and maps to keep the game going, which is very true. They actually, without even official support, were able to make these extra sort of community-based modes and maps and different mods to the game and keep it going separate from Hi-Rez officially stating that they weren't going to really support the game so much anymore. So I definitely have to agree with that, and I haven't really played Call of Duty World at War, but it does seem like it's one of the more popular older Call of Duty games outside of like maybe COD 4 that still gets some playtime. Who knows now that we move on to next-gen consoles, though. We'll see. Jason, what's the next one here?
This is from XZ Orbit, and he says, I would sure hope that developers learn to involve the community more and more in the development of their content and additions. Of course, the developers would have to set certain guidelines which the community would have to adhere to. This would allow the smaller development teams to push out content on a more consistent basis while still maintaining a certain level of polish and quality. And, I mean, what he talks about here, it does sound a lot like what SOE is doing, especially in terms of development, how they've got that, like the H1Z1 Reddit, and they're always on there saying, yeah, what do you guys think about this feature or that feature? And so they're trying to get feedback and get people to talk about their game or get people to offer advice on their game as they're developing it. So that's a part of it. But then they also have things like the the studio, whatever it's called, Player Studio, is that what it is? Mm-hmm. For like PlayStation, for PlanetSide 2. I imagine they're going to have it for H1Z1.
Or Landmark.
So, Landmark. But Landmark, you already create everything in there, so you almost don't need the studio separately. I guess that's how you do it. You sell on the studio. But yeah. So yeah, I mean, that is definitely a path that they're taking. They're very considerate of, and it's probably something that a lot of other companies, if they're successful with it, just like we said, like might have been the case with DCUO. If SOE can keep games going for a long time with this approach, it's going to be something that other companies are going to definitely copy.
Yeah, I mean, I think that almost every studio can adopt that sort of mentality in some respect, whether it'll be on a large scale or on a small scale, whether it be, things like weapon skins, or, different sort of like models and what have you, to large scale things like modes, or in the case of, say, like EverQuest, it would be like entire buildings, like landscape, monuments, etc. Mega17 actually makes a good point. He says, I think the use of community-created content will not become common as it is reliant on hype. There needs to be an established following, such as the ones for EverQuest or Unreal Tournament, that understands the kind of architecture and aesthetics to aim for when creating for the game. If the title is fresh, there will be little to bind people's visions, and developers will get little to work with that fits the world they are building. You will end up with a generalized cesspool that caters to everything while appealing to no one. So I do think it's very important, like he says, that if there is going to be community-made content, it has to be for something that has a clear vision of what it is.
Yeah, I think for the most part, you don't want to just have them just. I mean, granted, something like Landmark is a little bit of an exception, but you want to have it to be a game that has some established content and, like I said, that vision from the developers, from the professionals, basically, and then other people generally work within the confines of that.
It seems like he's suggesting that if it's going to work that way, it needs to be like, for a while, the developers at least need to be pushing out consistent content by themselves, just sort of like set the tone and stage for what players should expect things to look like and the level of quality. And then from that point on, when they introduce community-made content, that community-made content already has something to base it off of, essentially, like a level of quality, if you will.
Sure.
And I think we see that, for example, with games from Valve specifically, like CSGO. They have like their community-made content now, their workshop. Dota 2, obviously. And then Team Fortress 2. All those games had a pre-established aesthetic style. And sort of, Valve actually has a document you can download that explains exactly the art style, the color schemes, and everything that is accepted in a game like Dota 2 when you're creating community-made content. And if you go back really, really early and look at some of the early Dota 2 stuff that was made by the community, none of it got approved because it was like witch doctor with like a pistol, like a Glock pistol, and like wearing like a, backwards cap and look like gangster doctor or something like that. Like stuff like that, and you will have a lot of that you have to sort of sift through. So if you're going to be looking towards the community to make content, you're also going to make sure that you have to police and monitor that content to make sure that it fits with the overall style that you're going
And even
for.
not just talking the graphical style, you look at something like when Neverwinter first came out, and people would just make these short, repeatable, grindy missions where you just kill a bunch of orcs and that's it.
Level.
You get a bunch of XP and treasure. Yeah, exactly. So they had to eventually clamp down on that and sort of say, hey, dungeons need to actually user-created dungeons need to actually be something as opposed to just kill some stuff and get treasure.
Yeah, exactly. Some people are just going to use those mechanics to make things that are overly easy or exploitable sometimes. Exactly.
Or as we would say, with graphics, they just make penises.
Exactly. Giant dildos. That's if you have the ability to make something in a game, it's inevitably going to look like a dildo at some point.
Exactly.
That's how it is. That's sort of like almost like Murphy's Law, like if something's going to happen, is it Murphy's Law that if something's going to bad's going to happen, it will happen? Or Murphy's Law is, I think that's what it is. Exactly.
It's sort of like it's an extension of Godwin's Law. Godwin's Law says that any argument about any online argument eventually devolves into talk about comparing someone to the Nazis or Hitler. This is eventually an online game gets a penis in it.
Eventually, it always gets a penis. Which would you say that's sexist? I don't know.
Or boobs.
There's no equality there. Why just penises? It's got to be some equality there. All right. Well, moving on from the talk of digital virtual dicks, penises.
Wow. We're closing on a high note.
Yeah, right. Well, that's how it is with this podcast here. But we have the question of the week. This week's question is, what was your favorite game reveal from this year's E3? And I'm not talking about a game that was previously announced. I'm talking about a game that was either only slightly teased but no footage, and you got to see it for the first time, or a brand new game that completely caught you off guard. So if there's anything notable that you can remember from this year's E3, please let us know in the comments down below. Love to hear what kind of games you guys are looking forward to. And as always, you can contact us with any sorts of questions or comments, either regarding the question of the week or the Dabomb, Abomb, or all that stuff through the official channels. You can comment here on youtube.com/freemmogamer, otherwise known as MMOBomb. Send it to my email, michael@mmobomb.com, or hit either me or Jason up on Twitter, with my Twitter being twitch.tv/MMOBomb, and then Jason's Twitter being what, Jason?
Winter Informal.
Winter Informal. Informal. It's an informal winter with Jason Winter.
Yes.
That should be a show. You need to make a show called Now It's Time for an Informal Winter with Jason Winter. And it could be like Beyond the Fern or whatever, Between Two Ferns with Zach Galifianakis. It could be like
Winter Informal is coming. There you go.
There you go. And do you have any other sort of outlets, Jason, that people can reach you on?
Yes, in fact, I've been streaming quite a bit more lately on twitch.tv/JasonWinter.
What have you been streaming?
I did PlanetSide 2 this last week, and I did Defiance the week before that.
Oh.
Usually stream on Saturday nights. You can see the times on my channel.
Nice. I have a confession, Jason.
What is that?
I've been playing an MMO that isn't free to play. I know.
That's okay. I do that too.
It's sacrilege. It's sacrilegious.
You're fired.
I know. I would fire myself after the show, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. This is going to be the last one. I'm firing myself. We'll see you next time, guys. Smugglevai out. Later, guys.